Hi, I'm Bud Gibson. I'm the director of the Center for Digital Engagement at Eastern Michigan University, and I'm here to introduce the second day of the Digital Marketing Workshop in a session entitled The Future of Mobility. I'm joined by Sufjan Krunfla, who will be the moderator for this session, and Destiny Frank, who will be the question wrangler. And so, Sufjan, what have we got on tap here with the future of mobility?
Well, we have an exciting panel, and I'm going to introduce them. We have Sudhi Uppuluri. He's the
Well, why
CEO
don't I let
of
you
the...
just take it away and bring everybody on board and
Sure.
let you guys get started.
Thank you. Well, Sudhi, go ahead. Please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your company.
Sure. My name is Sudhi Uppuluri. I am the CTO of Green Root and Computational Sciences Experts Group. These are automotive tech companies based in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I've been working in the automotive industry for 20 years. I teach at University of Wisconsin-Madison a course on thermal management. I am a board member at the Kettering University Industry Advisory Board. And I am also involved in the SAE Technical Committee on thermal management. That's me.
Great. Nice to meet you. Daniel Siegal, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your company.
Sure. Thanks, Sufjan. Good morning. Daniel Siegal here, co-founder and CEO of Navv Systems. What Navv Systems is a company located in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and we develop and market a software platform called NavTrack that provides indoor location services specifically focused for healthcare. Now, I'm a physician, but I got my start in computer studying at Dartmouth College in Hanover. I was fortunate enough to have a mentor there who was a physician, but who was also an entrepreneur and an innovator. I guess you call him like a technology futurist before that term was really popularized. And what he did is he really energized me to pursue a career in medicine, but with an angle towards using technology to make healthcare better. So when I went to medical school, I naturally gravitated towards technology-focused specialties, and I eventually settled on radiology. Which has given me tons of opportunity to pursue innovation, really at the junction between healthcare and technology. And so when I finished my training at the Beth Israel Deaconess Hospital in Boston, I came out to Michigan and joined the medical group at Henry Ford Health System, where I've actually worked clinically ever since. And I started working closely with Henry Ford Innovations back in 2015, completed what they have called the Davidson Fellowship Program for Entrepreneurship in Medicine. And it was through all those connections that I was able to develop, incubate, iterate, and launch the ideas that eventually became Navv Systems.
Great. Nice to meet you. And Andrew, our last guest over here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sufjan. It's a pleasure to be with you here today on the panel. Yes, so I'm Andrew Israel with Automotive. This is a Brazilian-based company that has recently opened an office, a satellite office in Southeast Michigan, specifically through Spark. We're located now in the Spark East Center. We had been in the Ann Arbor Center, but needed to expand a bit, and we have an interesting software, hardware sort of integration product for quality control, specifically industrial quality control. Automotive certainly is a big part of that, which we'll get into here in a bit. My background, just to kind of back up a second, is interesting in the sense that I've studied so many sort of patents and inventions over the years that it's probably natural that I'm in this role as a product engineer, product developer, because I've seen it from the inside out. I was a patent examiner for many years at the U.S. Patent Office in now Alexandria, Virginia. It was, when I was there, it was in Crystal City, but just a few miles down the road. So certainly have seen my fair share of schematics and cutting edge technology. And so it's been exciting to to bring that to a small startup here in the Ann Arbor area, as well as in the greater Southeast Michigan. So I'm excited to sort of see where this will take us, and happy to be here today.
Well, great to have you all here. I just want to remind the audience over here to please, leave your comments, questions for the panelists. We'll sure get to them later on. Sudhi, I want to start with you. Each of the companies that you guys work with uses technology in order to design a more effective and efficient way of approaching a problem. Now, how was this problem first identified? And what was the process of designing tech to solve it?
Yeah, so what Green Route does, it's an energy efficient route to your destination. And so the way we came about this concept was through about 20 years of working on automotive powertrains, and with hybrids, plug-in hybrids, better. No matter how clean we made the powertrain, we found out that people were still wasting energy. We would still waste energy moving you to your destination. And that's because maps themselves, the routing themselves, were inefficient. The routing that we use today, going to your destination, is based on speed of travel. What is the fastest way to get to your destination? And doesn't really look at the energy consumption to get to your destination. It turns out, so that's kind of how it came about. So that's where the question was asked. Was there a better, efficient way to get to the destination? And it turns out about half the time, there is an energy efficient route to the destination. Doesn't cost you any more time than it would regularly take you to drive there. And it was really dependent on a number of factors, including the type of vehicle you drive. So whether you drive an electric hybrid vehicle or a pickup truck, it matters what route you take and which one would be your efficient route. Matters what traffic there is, matters what kind of hills, the number of starts and stops. And once we were able to frame the question that way and identify the question, then we could leverage our automotive powertrain work for about 20 years and say, all right, then now we're able to calculate an energy efficient route to the destination. So we use a lot of map models of different cars, different type of powertrains, in order to explore and determine a fast and energy efficient route to your destination. And it's about 15% in fuel and battery.
With gas prices the way they are right now, it's definitely we need something like this. So is there's an app right now ready for customers to use and install?
Yeah, so our initial going in, the short answer is yes, there is an app available. Okay. Our goal is to get this technology licensed with car companies or mapping companies so it can reach the most number of people. We recently got a grant from the state of Michigan to pilot this in Southeast Michigan. So in partnership with DTE Energy, we're providing Green Route to the Southeast Michigan EV drivers. Why EV drivers? Because we recognize fuel efficiency and gas prices are an issue, but battery range is a much bigger issue and an anxiety than higher gas prices. And electric vehicle drivers care a lot about extending battery range. And this technology does that. And so we're piloting this. It's available on the App Store only for Apple iOS users. And we're piloting this in Southeast Michigan. So if you're listening from Southeast Michigan, go take a look, download the app. I'd love to know what makes sense to you, what doesn't make sense to you, because this is a pilot and we're still trying to understand what matters to people and what doesn't.
Excellent. Dr. Dan Siegal, tell us a little bit about the Navv system and the technology problems and how did you solve it?
Sure. First thing I got to say is, as an EV driver myself, I'm going to go take a look at that app and download it later today.
Perfect.
For Navv Systems, our approach to the problem was really quite easy to identify.
Okay.
Anyone who's spent anytime in a healthcare facility, whether that is as a patient, a visitor, or a healthcare worker, knows just how large and complicated these buildings are, how easy it is to get lost, how hard it is to find anything, let alone get there on time once you've parked your car and navigated your way through one of 50 or 60 entrances and trying to find the floor that your clinic might be on. And as a clinician, there's nothing more frustrating than knowing that you have what you need in order to care for patients, but not being able to find it. And these kinds of delays really lead to unhappy patients, unhappy providers, unhappy hospital administrators. I'm sure you can imagine how things start to quickly back up in a sort of bad chain reaction. So indoor location isn't necessarily a new technology, but we've figured out how to use these tools in an easy and very user-friendly way to make healthcare better, faster, more cost-effective. So what we do is we take our software, we put apps on mobile devices, and we augment that with low-energy Bluetooth where appropriate. And that makes this a very easy to deploy, lightweight, easy to manage solution. And really, there's no better place than in a healthcare system to learn how to best solve these problems. That's why we incubated directly at Henry Ford Health System through the Henry Ford Innovations Group. So we essentially partnered with healthcare leaders, end users, and everyone in between to find out what's the absolute best, most user-friendly way to locate anything that's moving inside a hospital. It doesn't matter whether it's a visitor, a patient, employee, a route to a destination, a piece of equipment like an IV pump that might be needed to care for a patient. We can find that all now on a single platform.
Nice, nice. What about you, Andrew?
Yes, well, thank you, Daniel. Actually, for jogging my memory, listening to your talk about the way I summarized some of what you were saying was unhappy customers, and so we have the similar situation here at Automotive in regard to this quality inspection. Over the years, there's been, all of us have had some vehicle, at one time or the other that we picked up from the showroom floor, and then we drove it home, and it's like, oh my gosh, is there really a bit of a scratch here on this paint job? Is there some dirt or just something that's just not right about the way the appearance of the vehicle might be once you get sort of home? And it happens in all facets, not just automotive. Just a quick aside, my son and I are big baseball card collectors, and so we sometimes go to shows and we'll look at a card, under the lights of the show, and it looks, gem mint. It looks like this has got to be a 10, and I think it's something about the lighting in those venues that they almost sort of play tricks on your eyes, because when you get home and you look at that card under different lighting, oh wow, there's actually a crease here, there's a ding there, there's some stuff that I didn't quite notice. So that's the kind of thing that Automotive, the automated system, can pick up well before you drive it off the lot. And so that's ultimately what we're trying to reach, is to make customers happier with their product that they're purchasing, whether it be that vehicle that they've spent quite a sum of money on, or it could be an airplane. We do have applications that can scan the skin of an airplane using drones. So it's really sort of the sky is the limit in regard to the technology. But for now, we're sort of, our sweet spot is focusing more on the automotive sector and the painting in particular. But the surfaces don't necessarily have to be painted surfaces. So we have a strictly software solution that can take a CAD rendering of the surface even before it's out on the factory line, but just a figment of some sort of electrons on a computer screen. We can run our software against that design and pick up any imperfections well before it reaches the factory. So these are just some applications. We can get into some more details, I'm sure, later with any Q&A or other topics. But ultimately we're trying to make customers happy, and so that hasn't really changed in the 70+ years that there's been sort of this manual inspection of these automotive parts. So it really is ripe for disruption.
Great, great. Thank you very much. Let me go back to Sudhi over here. And I know you talked about your product. You talked about how friendly it is with the environment and how efficient you can move from one place to another. I want to know more about your strategy and how you showed your potential customers the impact of your product, of using your product.
Yeah.
What was your strategy?
So there are three big market or segments that we address. One's the consumer segment. So anybody who drives a car could use GreenBrew. The second segment is fleets and vehicles. So car makers or large fleets like UPS or FedEx who are driving hundreds of thousands of vehicles around. Energy efficient routing will reduce the number 2 line item, the most expensive line item on their thing, which is fuel costs. And then the third segment that we were working on was mapping companies where we can get this technology partnered with some of those. So then comes the strategy in terms of what segment do we go after, when you look at the size of the segment, the consumer segment's the largest. I mean, in terms of revenue generation from a consumer segment, it's the largest, mostly because a small, $1 or $2 per user multiplied by a large number of users generates a large amount of revenue. So from a revenue perspective, even though that segment's the largest, we find that the barrier to entry or the risk entering that segment is a lot higher. So as anybody who's developed any type of apps would know, that it costs anywhere from $1 to $5 per user to acquire for an app. And so if you're looking to get 500,000 or 1 million users, you're talking about $5 million in marketing dollars before you can enter that segment. So on the other hand, when we're working with fleets or car makers, it is a strict B2B value proposition where we say every dollar spent on GreenBrew will save them $5 in fuel, which is true, by the way. It is a lower cost, bigger impact for us. And so our strategy was to enter a market where it's lower risk for us. The marketing outlay in terms of dollars and in terms of risk is a lot smaller. And we're able to get traction, tweak the product if needed, and get traction and revenue in before we address the other markets. And so that's where we are right now. And so that is the thinking behind it.
Great strategy, great strategy. Let me go back to Dan over here. With your company started in 2018, how did you build your trust with the customers and with the technology and the health system that we have, and how did you design it around the customer needs?
Great question, Sufyan. Trust in healthcare is so important, especially when we've created a location services tool that could be perceived as a bit Big Brother-ish. One of the main modules in our NavTrack software platform is a tracking technology that helps healthcare workers be more efficient by observing their precise location in the building. So the truth is, we're being watched all the time, whether it's by closed circuit TV cameras, badges that we swipe to open doors, computer access logs, things like that. But what we've really tried to emphasize that NavTrack does differently compared to all of those other technologies is our tools help people, healthcare workers in this case, do their jobs better by monitoring and coordinating their tasks based on their location, proximity to the assignment, and their role, whether they're qualified to do that task. This is super important in healthcare these days because there are critical staffing shortages in nearly every area. So when we can help right off the bat with shortening queue times, anticipating bottlenecks, helping staff actually do more with less and in less time. That gets really well received and is really valuable to healthcare organizations. Secondly, I would add that any tool that's successfully used in healthcare absolutely has to be fast, reliable, and easy to use, because end users, especially clinicians, would otherwise just drop it right away. So we designed our interface to be mobile friendly, used on a device without any manuals or training. It looks and feels just like Google Maps or Waze or any other mapping app that we've all used. The only difference is now it works indoors and is highly accurate.
Excellent. Indeed, I was going to say, that's a great point that you mentioned about the trust and the healthcare. Andrew, I noticed your first initial is A and your last initial is AI. So I think, I'm going to start calling you AI. So,
yeah, well, I appreciate you picking up on that. Some people are right out of the gates. You can't get anything by them, and they're like, how did you end up AI with AI? But it works. And just as a disclaimer, I am no AI specialist, but certainly not by trade. My background is in physics, but I when it comes to the computer software side, I'm a bit of a newbie. I've certainly picked up a lot of the lingo, and prior to Automotive, I was with another startup, Ann Arbor startup, Voxel 51, and so handle a lot of the data, internal data, annotation procedures that have to go. Anytime you're dealing with AI, it's all about the data and how much can you collect, how good is the data, and so ultimately, that's what we're building here, and so that is a challenge. That's wasn't necessarily on number one of the list, but it certainly is a challenge. Anytime you're dealing in AI, is you've got to have good data to sort of build these systems on, and so the more our system can learn from whatever surface we're talking about. We even have an application running down in Brazil right now with Nestle. So this is way off from what you're thinking with automotive side, but this is the maker of the Kit Kat bar. So if you handed out a bunch of those Kit Kat bars at Halloween time, you can now realize that there's a mold, some kind of a plastic mold that has to shape that Kit Kat bar. And it has to be done in a way that everybody knows it's a Kit Kat bar. I mean, there's certainly quality control in the food industry tenfold, and so that is one area where we're applying this technology as well. So to learn a surface like that compared to a bumper on a vehicle, I mean, we're talking a wide difference from a technical challenge. So I guess that is certainly another layer to the challenge, is that we're trying to learn ourselves as a company what is the best fit. We hear that there's so much need in the quality control industry where do we apply our resources? Being a small company and having limited budget, we can't sort of be everything to everybody. We sort of have to find that niche. And so again, being in Southeast Michigan, having our roots here, this is sort of where we're pushing for now, but we're sort of always open for these one-off problems, and you just never know where that could take you. I think beyond that, sort of the big question a lot of companies have is validation. How are we going to validate this system? There's a lot of safety protocols you can imagine out on a factory floor when you're dealing with robotics, trying to implement robotics, maybe in a system that hasn't had any automation before. That's a big change, a change of mindset. It's physical change. It's an emotional change. I mean, you may have shifting of roles, human roles. They may have been inspectors at one point, but now they're sort of operating the equipment as opposed to just manually inspecting a car body. So there's a lot of change with that, and so I think having more conversations, honestly, the more we can meet with folks, and things are starting to open up a bit more now. We're able to get into some people's facilities and actually sit down and understand the problems, because you can't do it from a 10,000-foot view. You really do have to be on the ground level with folks because what's working for Ford may not be working for GM. What's working for GM may not be working for Whirlpool. So, we have to kind of really understand what's going on with their systems. The communication is a big part, the protocols that these robotic systems may be using could be different from plant to plant, from country to country. So we're looking sort of beyond borders, and so all of that is a lot, but it's fun, it's exciting, and I think that's what kind of gets us up in the morning is knowing we have a problem to solve, and let's get to work and solve it.
Excellent, great. Let us pause here and to get some questions from the audience and feedback. So Destiny, my co-host over here, what do you have questions from the audience?
First, we have a question for Sudhi from Matt. It says, Sudhi, is a subscription-based business model in the works?
Yes, it is. Our goal is to have a subscription. So if it's a premium model, so in the beginning, you can get 10 or 20 different route lookups for free, and if you wanted more number of route lookups, we would add a silver or a gold plan, depending on whether you use it more frequently or whether perhaps you're an Uber driver and you need to look this up quite a bit. But yes, it is in the works.
Okay. I also have a question for everybody from Jamie. It says, can you go into a bit more depth on your marketing strategies?
Anyone to take?
I'll jump in on that, and it's just also a plug to the Center for Digital, I'm going to say excellence. I mean, I know the engagement excellence. It really has been a great sort of partnership. This summer, we had a couple interns sponsored through CDE that were specifically in marketing. And this was a wonderful experience, not only for Automotive, but also for the individuals, helping them to have experience to take with them into the working world, if you will. I think they were rising seniors at EMU, and so this was great because again we have a bit of a marketing team in Brazil. And I think that's a challenge in its own right. Is again cross continent, cross cultural. Marketing is, marketing is a challenge no matter what you're doing. But if you're trying to market across cultures, that can also be another layer. So we're able to do that. But we utilized the help this summer, and that was a great experience. And so beyond that, I think as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of sort of flyers that you can create. There's a lot of sort of digital, which is great, and we certainly use that to the nth degree. But there's still that element of like let's meet, let's do what we can to either jump on a call, kind of explain this in more sort of nuanced ways because it's tricky. It's a tricky technology to sort of just say, here, take this flyer and you've got all that you need. I mean, certainly we'd love to have that, and we do have those materials, but we kind of need that sort of person-to-person connection, and it's not always the quickest sort of hey, we're gonna make a deal, but it's a way to begin a relationship, and so that's kind of where we stand.
Speaking of creating connections, we do have another question, and maybe
Sure.
Daniel, you can take this one. From Olivia, it says, did networking play a role in your company's development?
Absolutely. Healthcare and particularly health tech is a pretty small space. And if, they like to say that everybody knows everybody, that's pretty close to the way it is. And if they don't, they know somebody who knows the person you're trying to get connected to. And when you're looking at enterprise type solution, like we would typically provide our mapping to healthcare solutions, they're really looking for reference. They want to know who's using it, and why they're using it, and what kind of return on investment have they seen. And so that's why it's been so valuable for us to have a couple of early adopter partners that are healthcare systems that were willing to kind of give us a trial and put it in on a limited scope, pilot type of program, and see how that goes. Because what then happens, they start even talking behind our backs. By having really good connections and working those kinds of networks between hospitals, CIOs, other operational leaders, they've started reaching out to us because they've heard either through the grapevine or through their friends who they really trust that we're the ones to help solve the problem. You can have the greatest marketing materials in the world, but if you don't build trust in the market and with your customers, they're not going to be the one reaching out to you. So we found that to be invaluable in terms of building out our network, both of customers and what I would call thought leaders and advisors who kind of help provide that context for what it is and why we do it.
Great. All right, we'll go into one last question, and then we'll bring it back over to you, Sufyan. So we have a question from Jamie. How do you bootstrap sales growth? How do you bootstrap sales growth while keeping costs low? Whoever wants to take it first.
Well, maybe I can add a little bit to that. People do business with people, and people do business with people they know, and so the best way you can spend a lot of money in terms of in advertisements and getting your name out, but one of your first few customers will come from referrals or somebody you've talked to, somebody that knows you, trusts you, and is willing to take a chance on you because you don't have a proven record yet. But somebody who knows you knows that you could deliver the job. So in order to bootstrap sales, I would say skip all the big advertisements and all the big budget stuff. You need to get to list out the handful of people, 5, 10, 15 people that would likely be your first customer, and get introduced to them and have a one-on-one. There's no way to automate it. Have a one-on-one conversation with them through the referrals. And that's a good way to start.
Great.
All right.
Thank you very much, Destiny. We'll make sure you guys post more questions. We will have another chance to talk to Destiny at the end for more comments and questions. Let me go back to Andrew and Sudhi. We live in Michigan. We live in Detroit, close to the hub of the automotive industry. So how did that help you and your company expand? Being here in Southeast Michigan.
Yeah, I'll jump on that. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a great reminder. Sometimes I get carried away, and my mind is always kind of worrying, and I realized I meant to speak a bit about this topic before, and give another plug to one of our industry partners, which is ABB Robotics. So they're located in Auburn Hills, and the question earlier was about problems and how we're addressing them, and one of them that I had raised was this sort of validation, wanting to see it with people's own eyes. I mean, again, we can show sort of diagrams, we can show some sort of simulations that how this stuff works on their system, but folks really, if they're going to invest a significant amount of money, into these systems, they're going to want to see it working, not only just working on anything, but on their equipment too. So right. with this partnership we have with ABB, is a lab where we can actually demo the robotics setup with our camera head attached to one of the ABB robots, scanning. Right now, it's set up to scan a bumper. So we have a painted bumper. It's a Honda part, but it could be interchanged with any particular part that we might have a customer coming in. So that gives this potential customer sort of a feel like, okay, they can at least, take my part. If it was Volkswagen coming in and they wanted to see one of their bumpers, we could get that up and running. We could have it installed in the software, because there's a lot of changes with models. Model lines change all the time. So that's another big question about these type of automated systems, is how can they adapt to these changes? And so we have a setup where it's just a click of a button. Once our system learns that part and has it in the database, then it's just a matter of clicking a button. So we don't have to go back and redo a lot of things that are being kind of wasted as far as efficiencies these days. So anyway, I mean, being here in Southeast Michigan, we just have access to all of that industry. And then having this lab here in Auburn Hills, it's a bit of a trek from Ann Arbor, but today the traffic wasn't too bad. I'm actually on site today for a customer meeting after this call. So it's a good place to meet folks. And if anyone that's watching today is interested to come and see this technology in action, love to have you here in Auburn Hills.
Great. Sudhi, what about you, being close to this automotive hub? How did that help your company and expand your company?
Yeah. So customer voice is the key, number one. Right? And so anytime you're developing something new, you would want to go to the customer first.
Sure.
Before you start spending a lot of money developing it or polishing it. So is this anything? I mean, is this how this would work? And let the customer tell you why it wouldn't work, or what more it needs to be done. And so it is very critical for a customer to be involved in every single step of the way, all the way from a number of concept iterations to prototypes to testing and all of that. And so being close to the customer means that you can actually coordinate with the customer, develop relationships with the customer, and be able to include the customer in every single step of the way.
Let me talk to Dr. Siegal over here and tell us a little bit about the process for testing new technology before it's ready and be sold to customers and companies. What was the process?
Sure. Thanks, Sufyan. In healthcare, as I've mentioned already, everything almost has extra layers of security, privacy, compliance issues. So we have to follow a very diligent and robust design, development, testing, and QA process. So we've been very successful using agile development framework with a lot of short sprints, focused, compartmentalized goals to make sure that as new features are developed, they really fit closely and align with what we're trying to deliver for our customers. Because as was just said by the other panelists here, that customer input and feedback really can't be overemphasized how important that is. So making sure that as things come out, they're iterated. We do some A/B testing with customers to make sure features look and feel the way we want them to. We've also had some good success with asking everyone in our company, and we're small at this point, everyone in the company plays some role in quality and testing. And we've been impressed. I really enjoy how much feedback this produces and how helpful it is for everyone in the company to really be grounded in what the product is. Whether you're a developer or designer or not, you should have some understanding of how it works and how it feels to really use it as a true end user. So the only other thing I would add in terms of validation for customers and making sure it gets out when it's ready is that I like to think that perfect is the enemy of good. One of my favorite quotes by the founder of LinkedIn, Reid Hoffman, is that if you're not a little bit embarrassed by the release you're putting out, you probably waited too long. So there's always a fine line between making it just right and getting it out so you can really get some validation in the market.
Absolutely. What about you, Sudhi? How did you, test for the new technology before it's ready and sold to the customers and companies?
I would second everything that was just said. First of all, everybody in our company used Green Route and put in a lot of very interesting feedback back to us. And some of them are in India, some of them are in here in Michigan. And secondly, we are a little embarrassed about the beta app that's out there. We wish it was more polished. We wish it had features. We actually have a long list of features we wish it had. But the goal is to get it out there to the customers, because we want the customers to tell us what's working, what's not working.
Right.
We want them to tell us whether the new features that we're thinking about are all that critical, or maybe those are nice to have, but there are other things that are there. So yeah, absolutely. We drew a line in the sand and said, okay, as long as it has these features, these are the critical ones, let's get it out with the customer and get feedback from them. And every single person internally here tested it, including me.
Wow. AI, what about your company?
AI, yes. I like that. That's kind of got a nice ring to it. So, yeah. Well, we're in a little bit different boat. In a sense, we've been fortunate to have our proving grounds in Brazil. So, in a sense, yes, we still are a startup, but here in the U.S., it's very small. It's myself and the CEO Renan. So it's a small group, but in Brazil we have about 30 employees that have been working since 2016 on these problems. So and a lot of this is in this testing phase, and so pilot projects that were picked up. There was recently one with Embraer, airplane manufacturer, on this drone technology that I mentioned, that was very successful. So through it all, I think it was mentioned earlier, these relationships from one customer to the other, the word of mouth, that's really where it has happened in Brazil, to really spread the gospel, if you will, of Autotausa, of sort of the efficiencies that can be saved with this type of technology. And it's really taking off. I mean, Volkswagen has just signed on recently for a longer term engagement. They had been in a pilot phase in Brazil and now have shifted to more of a production phase. So this is all exciting. It is exciting energy. And so that's really the hope as we grow here in the U.S. to kind of piggyback off of that energy. We found it's not quite as easy as you think. Oh, well, just because Volkswagen adopted in Brazil, right, they're going to adopt somewhere else. There's a lot of other factors there. And so we're not naive to believe that, but we do feel like these relationships that have been discussed will at least give us a foot in the door, and then we can kind of take it from there. So yeah, we feel like the testing has been very positive, and we're just ready to kind of roll with it here in the USA.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about your potential customers. How do you show them the value of trying a new product and technology, and how do allow them to invest in the future? Dan, let's start with you.
This is really hard in healthcare, to be fully honest. It is very hard. Healthcare is often one of the last to adopt new technology.
It's a different ball game,
It is a totally different ball game, and they're often very resistant, right, especially with larger organizations, to be among the first to try new technology. So we've worked very hard to leverage our network of connections to find and work with the organizations that are futuristic thinking, that are willing to pilot and be a little bit more forward thinking and innovative with tools like ours. The other thing to consider is there is a whole dimension to being a health tech software company when it comes to security, privacy, data integrity. And we've obviously spent a lot of time making sure that all of that is completely bulletproof. We wouldn't be where we are without that. But quite frankly, for us, what has been most effective is simply showing we grew up in healthcare. We were informed by healthcare leaders, and we were designed specifically for healthcare. And that even though the technology that we're using might be new, it makes sense for healthcare these days, especially with the staffing shortages and cost challenges that everyone is dealing with these days. Absolutely. When we're able to show how our tools help patients and visitors find their way around, help the staff be more efficient, and help manage assets more effectively, it resonates really quickly, and the hesitancy tends to go away pretty quickly.
Great. What about you, Sudhi?
So getting trust from the customers. It's a step-by-step process. So I'm going to talk about like B2B customers, right? The segment that we're targeting. We've got to find the right kind of customer that is looking to get the edge and looking for new technology. So there are customers that are really big, large, bureaucratic, established, not invented here, so we're not interested, right? So that's fine, and B. And then you'll have other type of customers that are perhaps too small or have a very certain focus, and they are just trying to survive or trying to launch a new product, and so they're not interested in any outside input. So you got to find a customer that is, actively. So in our case, we are looking for fleets and car companies that actually have a very particular focus on sustainability and focus on looking at new AI-based technologies that would extend battery range. Now, if we go to a large conglomerate, like let's say VW, they would say, well, we're VW, we're the largest car maker in the world. We know everything. We have engineers that do everything, thank you very much. If we go to somebody super small, like a EV maker who's just trying to launch their first vehicle, their number one goal is to launch that vehicle successfully and get positive press for it, right? They aren't necessarily looking for advanced technologies to extend battery range. So we really got to find these fleets and car companies that are established themselves, but really looking for, are receptive to newer technologies, receptive to thinking outside the box and getting technologies in there that would separate themselves. So there are actually a number of automotive tier 1 and car companies that we are actually in discussions with, who see the technology as something that can really set them apart. And so number one goal is for us to find the customers that are receptive, or that will likely going to be receptive. And then secondly is to get introductions into the company. As I said earlier, people do business with people, and preferably with people they know. And that's where trust comes in. And so so in that way, the Ann Arbor Spark ecosystem is very useful, because if they know
assume that, okay, in this sector, all the problems are, X. Well, I mean, you might find that they're X minus 2 or X plus 3. I mean, they're a little bit different. Lab and ABB, that's a first step. That's a first step to really have a place where we can engage in a meaningful way and showcase the technology, understand their issues that they might have, and understand, hey, let's take a site visit to your facility next if this is possible. It's a little challenging in some sense, but most likely they're able to have us down there, and then we can really assess their product designs and the layout of their floor. I mean, ultimately, it's efficiencies is what we're talking about here. So if we have a human at 9 o'clock in the morning looking at a part versus, at 3 p.m., I mean, I know I'm kind of, out to lunch by 1 p.m. some days. And so to think that my quality is going to be the same, at 9 that it is at 3, and I've been doing this all day long and looking at these parts, it's just not humanly possible. And so that's really one of the core areas where we can find savings. And it's not necessarily putting people out of work. I think that's people originally think, oh, well, gosh, we're just taking robots are going to take over. Well, no, we said that the roles are shifting. We still need humans in the loop. I mean, you can't just sort of turn the switch and then go from there. So we need to have someone who's sort of more of an operator, if you will, that's operating a whole system as opposed to just sort of walking a line and doing more repetitive tasks. So it's really kind of retraining from the ground up. And those efficiencies will quickly go away. And the last thing I'll say is the data is ultimately that is so valuable. We talked about it for training the system, but also for the OEM or whoever's data it is that we're the part that we're inspecting, is that we have a way of now tracking that information. Where was the defect? Where was the scratch on the part? It's all in a system that's been saved that can be shared with other departments. So all that data becomes available to anyone within the company, whereas before it was just maybe writing it on a piece of paper and then it's gone by the end of the day. So those are some areas that I think we can make some great headway.
Absolutely. Let me go back to Destiny over here. I've been told they have a few questions coming from the audience. So Destiny, can you give us some of those questions?
Yes, we have a question from Matt, and it says personalization and privacy are two major enablers and inhibitors of mobile services. To what extent does your service or will your service be affected by the two? Any specific examples appreciated? Why don't we start off with you, Sudhi, and Green Route?
Sure. So in terms of personalization, it's the following. First of all, Green Route is dependent on what type of a vehicle you're driving. So if you're driving an electric vehicle, if you're driving a 2019 Tesla Model 3, or if you're driving a Ford F-150, your Green Route is different. And so we need to know the very specific vehicle that you drive. So we asked you, year, make, and model. Please tell us what year, make, and model that you're driving. Now, the second personalization that we do in there is we have a leaderboard of how much carbon dioxide you've saved from emitting into the atmosphere. And so we accumulate all the carbon savings that you're doing and all your friends. And we have a little leaderboard saying, here's where you are in terms of pounds of CO2 saved. So those are the two pieces of data that we track and that we share among them. And we do these because, this gamification helps people motivate, and type of vehicle is important for us to do the correct, accurate calculation. There are other data that, such as where you're driving, what route you're taking. It was suggested to us that we track, because you say, well, how do you know someone took a green route and really saved their carbon? You got to really track and make sure they're taking the green route. And after discussion, we said, well, when you start tracking how people are driving and where they're going, and suddenly it becomes a big brother issue. Like, are you keeping track of where I'm going? Are you keeping track of how fast I'm driving and whether we're speeding? And so that's a number of data that we don't track. So we don't know where you've been. We know what type of car you drive and we look up the green route for you, but we don't track whether you took the green route or not. We don't track what routes you've been. And so we have we maintain a very razor thin profile of the user. So it's a very important issue for us. We need some level of personalization to do the right job, but no more than what's minimum required in order to break the trust with the customer.
Great. We also have a question from Bethany. It says, what has helped you get to where you are in your current position? And what advice would you have for others who want to set off in a similar direction? Why don't we start off with Daniel, if you could start with that question. I know we don't have too much time, but maybe if we go around and quickly get everyone's answers.
Sure, I can answer that real quick, Destiny. It's people and persistence. It's realizing that you can't do it all yourself. I was fortunate enough to get that advice pretty early on and make sure that we built out the team around with people whose skills complemented one another and that filled what we identified as the most important gaps within our business early on. There's no substitute for people. It's already been brought up in the sales and marketing process. The same goes for building a business, 100%.
Andrew, do you have anything to add or your experience?
Sure, certainly, I would say don't be afraid to fail, and I mean that in a very positive way, because I actually don't think there are failures in a sense that maybe we think of it. It's really just experiences, and so you might think, oh, this is a risky thing, or should I go to this school or this job or that job? Ultimately, take a chance, take a choice. It's all life in a sense, and that you're going to kind of learn from that, whether in your own mind, you'd become a total failure, whatever it was, but you know that you can get yourself back up and learn from that. So I would say just don't be afraid, and certainly to Daniel's point, yeah, just if you have a question and you're not really sure what should I do, then find a friend, whoever it is, co-worker, somebody that you can trust, and talk to them, and you can work it out.
Great, Sudhi.
Yeah, very similar. I say, when in doubt, do it. So when you're thinking, should we try this? Do it, and even if you fail, it would have been worth the trying, because you would have learned and you would apply it to the future. So should you start this company? Yes, do it. Should we try marketing? Should we try talking to these people? Yes, do it. So when in doubt, do it. It'll move forward, or you'll learn.
Great advice. Sufyan, I know we don't have too much time left, but I'll hand it over to you.
Great advice. I like the fact you didn't say you failed, so great. Maybe one more question for the panelists over here. Our title is the future of mobility. What do you think is the future of mobility, and what does that mean to you? Let's start with you, Daniel.
Sure thing, Sufyan, thanks. The future of mobility to me is a platform. It's a group of interconnected technologies that will transform how people interact and engage with one another across distance, whether it's long distance or short distance, much in the same way that GPS changed the way we travel and communicate outdoors over the last 20 years. This is just starting to happen indoors now as well, and will 100% revolutionize industries like healthcare. I fully believe that the healthcare system of the future, hospitals of the future, will be using indoor positioning systems in ways that we haven't even yet imagined. But that's why we're building Navv Systems and NavTrack to be at the center of an evolving ecosystem of location technologies to integrate everything on a single platform and map anything that moves indoors, whether it's people, devices, medical equipment, or even supplies. And it's very exciting. We're happy to be here.
Great. What about you, Sudhi?
I think the future of mobility will follow energy consumed. So we're 7 billion people on Earth right now. And by the time my kids are my age, in 30 years, we'll be 11.5 billion people on Earth. And so if everybody tries to have a car to drive around themselves, or live in big, fully heated houses, there isn't enough energy on Earth. There isn't enough food to feed everybody, and there isn't clean water. So these are the fundamental forces. And so to move a 200-pound, that's a bud, to move 200 pounds of bud from his home to university shouldn't require me to move 200 pounds plus a 3,000-pound car along just to move him. And so there are other options, public transport being one, electric bikes being another. And so I think we would become more, the future of mobility would really look at first principles in terms of how much energy am I really consuming per person, and can we afford to do so, and really optimize. I'm not suggesting one particular technology or the other. just looking at these macro resource constraints at hand.
AI?
Thank you. I think of the future of mobility as a connected network, and I mean that in a broad sense. Certainly, there's going to be sort of informational networks that can help people to get from A to B, whether it's a ride-sharing programs or other just access to a vehicle that they don't know exists, that is just down the road. They might be able to find some sort of transportation. So I think we're all going to be more and more engaged, interpersonal, connected as we move forward, and I think that's a good thing.
Gentlemen, we're running out of time over here. I really enjoyed having you all. Great products. The future is now actually with your products. I want to thank you all, three of you, for being here. Thank you for the audience for listening to our conversation. Don't forget to join us tomorrow for our panel, Finding Your Audience. Thank you guys very much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.